Hi, y'all. This is Kristen Chenoweth.
Hi, I'm Gloria Stefan.
This is Sarah Bareilles.
Hi, I'm Patty Lapone.
This is Lin-Manuel Miranda. You're listening to the Broadway Podcast Network. Hi, I'm Scott Bakula. Welcome to the Theater Podcast with Alan Seals.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Theater Podcast, intimate personal conversations with the industry's biggest names. I'm your host, Alan Seals, and our guest today is none other than Scott Bakula. If you are of a similar age as me, you probably remember Scott from Quantum Leap, one of my all-time favorite shows as a kid, which of course we're going to cover. But in case you didn't know, Scott was a singing and dancing man first before he ever made it into TV and film. So that story is actually really, really incredible. And did you know he's also got a Tony nomination for some work that he did even before he was in Quantum Leap? That's kind of insane. So his story's amazing. Can't wait to share it with you. As always, you know what to do. Find me online and all the social medias. Tag me in your stories. Let me know you're listening. And do the thing. Tell your friends. Help this podcast grow. Leave a rating and a review wherever you're listening. And please enjoy this episode with Scott Bakula.
Here you go. 1, 2, 3.
Oh boy, guys. Oh, there we go. I didn't mean that, but now I'm going to use that. Oh boy. I am absolutely thrilled to introduce today's guest, who for 5 years, from 1989 to 1993, commanded the leading role of Dr. Sam Beckett in one of my all-time favorite shows, Quantum Leap, which earned him a Golden Globe Award and multiple Emmy nominations. Other TV and film credits include, of course, Captain Jonathan Archer on Star Trek Enterprise, American Beauty, Necessary Roughness, Murphy Brown, and Ray Romano's Men of a Certain Age. Aside from lending his voice to animated series such as American Dad, The Simpsons, and Archer, this guy also has a Tony Award nomination for his performance in the 1988 Broadway production of Romance, having made his Broadway debut in a show called Is There Life After High School in 1982. Additional stage credits include Marilyn from 1983, Three Guys Naked from the Waist Down in 1985, for which he received a Drama Desk Award nomination, and not just an incredibly handsome face. He can sing and dance, folks, and is now showing off those skills 8 times a week as Conrad O'Brien in The Connector, which was just extended through March 17th at MCC Theater here in New York. Scott Bakula, welcome to the Theater Podcast.
Thank you. I'm exhausted from that introduction, though. I don't know how you're doing it.
Well, I had my coffee. And we need to point out that, what day we're recording this? Do you realize what day this is?
I do. It's Leap Day.
Leap Day?
Yes. We used to have special kind of leap every 4 years. We had one leap day during the time when we were shooting Quantum Leap, so that was a big deal. We had some event, festival kind of thing, which was cool.
That's cool. Yeah, when your team confirmed this on the 29th, I was like, I hope they did that on purpose. I highly doubt they did, but I thought it was such kismet. I was like, I had to call that out.
I'm sure some under the subconscious world, I was like, yeah, we got to do that, because somebody else had called and specifically asked, can we do something for Leap Day? And I said, I don't have time to do that, but I'm here doing this with you.
Oh, I appreciate it. I appreciate you. And seriously, though, I mean, I know you're tired. You're got to be tired of talking about Quantum Leap. We'll touch about it a little bit because we'll go through your career and everything. But I have to say, though, there are very few people that I guess with everybody that I've interviewed in the circles that I am fortunate enough to kind of be part of these days, there are very few people who still like kind of make me a little bit nervous. One might say fanboy. And so you are one of them, because I realized that it's the people who were in the shows or did things that influenced me as a young child. And I'm 43 now. So
you're still a young child.
Quantum Leap was just, it got me into appreciating sciences and science fiction and like the possibilities of time travel and all sorts of other things. I just love that kind of stuff. And then side note, I met Mark Summers the other day too, because Mark Summers has a show off Broadway as well. So like meeting you two back to back, I can die a happy man now.
Well, let's not talk about dying anything. But
okay.
No, I grew up with just a love of science fiction myself. So ironically, I've been so lucky and fortunate. I've done a bunch of sci-fi work in my career, And I don't know why that is necessarily, but I'm certainly open to those kinds of ideas. So maybe when I get a script, I'm not like, I don't get this, or I don't want to do this. I don't like, I'm always, get it, bring me more. So that show was simply, we talked about big concepts, but it was a very simple, subtle kind of show, and reduced to its bare, the basics. It was just about trying to, walk a couple miles in somebody else's shoes and see what their life would be like, and how that affects everybody else's lives. So, and it was really a great show to be a part of, because it was Don Belisario, who's a legend, and then Dean Stockwell, who was just a buddy of mine. And then we had the best crew and directors and people that I'm still friends with that still direct me, and at NCIS and stuff like that I've kept up with, because they profoundly affected my journey.
Well, Dean became a mentor to you, yeah?
Yeah, very much so. I lived in New York for 10 years. I'd gone to LA with a show called Nightclub Confidential, a musical, and of course, as life goes, 2 years into being in LA, and I'd been getting some work in LA, and I'd done some guest spots. I did Designing Women, and I'd had my own a 9-episode failed series called Gung Ho, based on the movie, and then I did Eisenhower and Lutz with Alan Burns, and all these great Henderson Forsyth, a very famous, well-loved New York actor, and we became fast friends. But he came out to L.A. and Pat Richardson and Delane Matthews, and I had such great early success there, and then bang, I get Romance, and I come back to New York, get a Tony nomination, and we had a very kind of high profile for a little tiny show, a lot of attention. And then after 6 months or so, I decided it was time to go back to New York, and back to LA, and a month after that, the Quantum audition showed up. And,
really?
Yeah. And I don't know, I always think, I wonder if I'd stayed in New York and been put on tape, and if I would have still gotten it. And I don't know. Steven Weber was one of the guys who flew out from New York, and we've become buddies over the years. And I always thought, if that had been me, I don't know. I just don't know if I would have gotten it or not. But
I hear that a lot from people now, especially post-COVID or during COVID, and then now it's continued out of COVID, that so many casting directors just find it easier for them to accept all these self-tapes and everything. But it makes it so much harder on the actors, because they have to be their own lighting designer and audio engineer and videographer, and then get into character and learn their lines and all that stuff. No. It seems impossible.
It's a terrible state of our business, and it's been perpetuated. It was kind of going there before COVID. Just being I'm on the other side of the camera, a lot. I have been a lot during other projects, and you just don't get the same vibe as when somebody's in the room. It just does. There's no way to do that. Yeah. And I've seen so many self-tapes, and I feel so bad for everybody that's doing a self-tape, including myself. I think that one of the last self-tapes I did, which has been a minute, but was for the revival of Annie. And I was in my living room in Los Angeles singing. I don't know if it was NYC or whatever it was, and it was just like what. I'm never gonna get this, and I didn't, and that's fine. But I just feel, especially for the young people who are trying to get started, it's such an empty kind of experience, and the reality is, in the old days, and I'm old, but you develop a relationship with the casting people when you go in and meet them. You develop a relationship with the director who may say, you're too tall for this part, but I'm going to remember this guy for another time. And or you go in and you have a terrible audition, but all of that is live experience that you add to your mechanism, to your instrument, and you build off of that. And there's a kind of I'll throw up my little gray tarp and get my little mirror, my little circle light, and do it, and I'm done, moving on to the next thing. And it's very limiting in my opinion. And I always want to be with people in the room.
Huh. That's really interesting. I agree too. There's so much you can pull from someone's energy and the way that someone else responds to a line or whatnot. I mean, chemistry readings are a real and necessary thing because you could be the greatest actor and then like go back to Dean Stockwell, right? If you guys could have been like oil and water and then the scenes don't work.
Right, and we read together for Quantum, and we read. There were other beautiful actors that were reading for that part. I was already cast, and then they were looking for Al, and Dean and I rode down in the elevator when it was over, and I just said, I just can't imagine that we're not going to do this together because he was so good, and I was blown away, and I just thought it just felt like it was going to happen, and thank goodness it did. But that's a big part of it, that you get chemistry. You also are allowed to be directed by, if the director is in the room, because that used to happen in the old days, and now that doesn't happen anymore. I think a lot of directors, no offense to them, but they're not that comfortable with actors. And a lot of directors a lot of directors don't come through the theater where they're forced to work with actors, and they're able to, when you have the ability to sit on a monitor off, away from the set and watch somebody, you're not really experiencing what they're doing because you're not next to them, you're not feeling it. A lot of people they're not that comfortable with actors, and that's the business is losing a huge element of what we all got into the business for in the beginning, was to be in these interesting relationships with people and develop characters and work on things together and create a role and create a character. And there's a little bit of this that's crept into our world. Witness us doing this on Zoom instead of being in a room together, but that's where the podcasts are. That's where the people get their information, the TikTok world, all of that stuff. So we are slowly kind of insulating ourselves, whether it's intentional or not, and there's a loss there in the creative process, I think.
Oh, I 100% agree. And it comes from, I think, a fundamental loss of being able to connect with somebody literally at the basics of human connection, of eyesight, looking somebody in the eyes, physical touch of like hugging somebody, greeting somebody. It's so isolating to be in Zoom all day with people and never be able to bump into them, like literally bump into them, whether it's affectionate or not. Like you step around people, we're herd animals and we need companionship in whatever form that takes. So I 100% agree with you.
Just the reality that you and I got to meet each other last night. We have a different relationship today. Yeah, because we shook hands and said hello, and we were milling around with a bunch of people, and you were kind enough to come see the show and all of that stuff. So we already have history, and if we met again or talked again the third time, we'd have more history, and that's just the nature of what we do.
I want to go back to Little Scott, because you mentioned that you were into sci-fi, and I know you were born in St. Louis. I think you grew up in the St. Louis area too, right? So around Missouri, into sci-fi, and you said something a second ago that made me think, yeah, you're a theater dude. That it's creating together, it's connecting, it's being with other people in the same room and bringing this art form together. How did you get out of St. Louis into TV, film, musicals? And it sounds like you always wanted to do theater first.
Yeah. Well, I'm a singer first. I started doing things with my, and I'm a musician, I'm a piano player. And so I had a rock band very early, and I was comfortable and liked doing that a lot. And then I sang with a kids choir with the symphony when I was in 5th grade, and the music teacher had suggested that I do this symphony thing, and I did that, and that was fun. And I went to this Presbyterian church in St. Louis. They were doing a Christmas operetta, Amal and the Night Visitors, if you're familiar with that. And she suggested to the musical minister of music at the church that I could possibly play that part. And so that was it for me. I was with some beautiful, fantastic, gifted actors and singers, especially, and musicians. And so that was kind of the bug. And then I just started doing plays and continued with the rock band. And then that led to Godspell and Joseph and shows like that and plays. And I just kept pursuing it and pursuing it. And then I had a decision to make when I quit college because I thought I was going to do a national tour of Godspell that fell apart, that's a whole nother story. But I think I want to go to New York because I don't know anything about the TV and film industry in St. Louis. And off I came to New York. And my intention was I never thought I wasn't interested in film or TV. That wasn't part of a dream of mine or anything. I just thought, I wonder if I can get to New York and make a living as an actor in the theater.
That's insane. I mean, you don't think about this stuff, especially as a kid, right? So in '89, I was 8 or 9, depending on when I started watching, but 9-ish, we'll say.
Yeah.
And then you think that everybody you see on TV has just always been doing that, especially when you're 9 years old. And you had already been head first into theater and playing piano in a rock band. I assume, right? You were playing piano. Yep. That's insane.
Electric keyboards and piano.
Yeah. Just all of this that people don't hear about. They're just like, oh yeah, this guy shows up and all of a sudden he gets this great show, and then the career is made. But no, there's just years and years and years of struggle and hardship and trying. And rejection. Yeah,
but the New York years, I would never. I mean, it's been kind of profound to come back here. I think we hear the story of oh my gosh, they that's a child actor and they've been doing that their whole lives and they were in this show. I was looking at we saw Sweeney yesterday and I was looking at Aaron's bio, and he's done he's been killing it for years. I mean, we all know Sutton's story, but most of us, it's not immediate, it's struggle. I also had to, I had a lot to learn. I was kind of off the boat from St. Louis with not a lot of, I remember somebody very early saying to me, I think it was in St. Louis before I left, but somebody came to see a cabaret, I'd done cabaret. Somebody said rudely, but honestly said, "You don't even know how to stand on stage." And I was like, what's he talking about? I hadn't even thought about it. And I was like, oh, okay, well, there's more to this than just showing up and knowing you're singing your songs. But I've been so lucky. And what I was going to say was I'm so struck by the struggle of New York, the greatest city in the world for theater, in my opinion. Folks in London might disagree, but it's really hard. It's really, really hard. And nowadays it's way harder than it used to be because there's so many fewer options. The summer stock theaters and all, so many of those are gone. And every summer, we would run in, March and April, and you'd have 3 or 4 or 5 auditions a day for all these different summer stock shows that were going out. And you just see everybody everywhere, and it was this kind of communal thing. And those things, and that was just like, oh, that's a training ground. I can go there and I can do Shenandoah for a summer, in 10 different, theaters around the upper northeastern seaboard, and have for a week each place, and have a ball and make a bunch of friends. And some of those people went on to be directors, and then they'd hire me for something else or whatever. And you built that community. And here, going back to what we were talking about, just the isolation of the business, it's just harder to find your way through it. And Fergie, the regular Willis in the show, and he was asking me, he said, how do we navigate this stuff? I said, I can't really tell you, because I didn't have to figure out a website and followers and people to, sample my recordings of a thing I did at a club. So, all that, and put all that together and keep adding information every day to keep myself hip and vital and current. And I was just like, I went to my singing lessons, I went to my dance classes, I went to my, my acting classes, and then I went to auditions, and I cobbled together enough food to pay the rent of $150, for my little stupid studio and up in Spanish Harlem, and that's all I kind of had to worry about. And there's so much more, and do your own auditions now, and figure out all of that stuff, and the agenting thing has changed, and it's just. It's so much more complicated, and there's a lot more competition. And these young kids coming out of schools, they're good. You know, they're not just hacking around. I was kind of hacking around when I got to New York a little bit. I can remember just horrible early auditions where, 16 bars, and I was like, oh my God, how am I going to whittle this down and do that? And they, it just disasters.
Hang on, everybody. We're just going to take a quick break. All right, now we're back.
I just feel for the people that fight to be in New York and try and make it in New York. It's not easy. It's
tough, and I love Fergie too, Fergie Philippe, because he's got a podcast with Broadway Podcast Network too. So it's Time to Meet the Muppets. He's a huge Muppets fan. I don't know if you
yes,
you two have talked about that.
I do because I'm good friends with Frank Oz, who directed me, and Fergie has become friends with Frank and his wife. Victoria, and we had dinner just 2 weeks ago, all of us together, and we just had a ball.
Frank is hard to Frank's personality is hard to break into.
Oh yes,
but once you get in there,
correct, and that's intentional. That's intentional.
Yeah.
He directed me at the Chocolate Factory in London and a few years ago, and people would come from far and wide with a poster of Yoda and for him to sign, and he would be out the back door going the other direction. He was like, and he's got his own rules, he's got his own standards, and I applaud him for that. He's got boundaries, and I could use a few lessons from him really on that, because I'm not that good about that stuff.
Well, I think you're doing great, and that's why I said at the beginning, I always give people an out. I assume they're always asked questions about things like, in your case, Quantum Leap. I'm like, I'm sure you're always tired about it, so that's your chance to jump in and say, yeah, I'm kind of tired. So I take the hint and move on to something else. But it's just interesting.
No, I appreciate that.
And I want to move over to the connector. You brought up the connector with Fergie. It's such an amazing show. I knew it was good. I didn't know it was this good. And I saw it for the first time last night. Well, it's a fictional story based on true events, right? So it's basically you own a magazine company. This whole thing's set in the late 90s, where like the big magazine boom was happening, and the internet was just becoming a big thing. So there was all that competition. And so you own the company. There's this new hotshot comes in from Stanford and just blows it all up by creating what we should call alternative facts.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's the word being thrown around today in 2024, unfortunately. So I guess the connector for you, has your view on journalism changed after doing the show? Because I think the whole show in general sort of throws to the audience, what's more important, literal truth or what seems to be the truth? Perceived truth.
Yeah. There's so much. The show is so dense. We could sit and talk about the difference between truth and facts for the rest of the time that we're chatting here, and what does that even mean, and who's sitting around contemplating that. But because some of these issues have been thrown into our face in the last few years, when somebody uses the expression alternative facts, it just sets the world upside down. The show is so poignant, and yes, I've learned a lot more about how often this happens in the literary world, how often it has happened. Oh my gosh, when we first day of rehearsal, we came in and Daisy had sent me, Daisy Prince, who directed it beautifully and conceived it. It's her baby, birthed it before she gave it to Jonathan to write, who did a magnificent job. I'm not even talking about Jason, because he's the reason I'm
Brown. Yeah,
he's the guy.
The score itself is so good.
It's spectacular. But she had on a bulletin board, I think maybe 20 different articles or different events that had happened, and many of them were from the New York Times, of people that had misstated, misjudged, or written things too soon, which is what happens in our world all the time now.
Well, now you have to be the one to get the scoop.
Right, and then they all come with a disclaimer now. We haven't had an opportunity. They say this on MSNBC all the time. We haven't had an opportunity to confirm this, but our parent network is saying that they've confirmed it, blah, blah, blah. And it is all about the scoop. It is all about, this is also, when did CNN start? The 24/7 news cycle that people have to fill and also have to try and stay ahead of. And so it's just brought all of that more and more into focus for me. I have a 28-year-old son who has been pounding it into my wife and my brain for the last several years that we'll talk about something. He'll say, well, where did you get that? What's the source? Mm-hmm. You know that they're owned by such and such company, so they're going to be, their point of view is like, oh, no, that's not true. Yeah, it is. And so he's really kind of helped balance my perception about all of taking every word for the New York Times as gospel, which I quite frankly believed for years and years and years. But many of the articles on the wall that Daisy had up were from the New York Times, and it's amazing. And it happens at the Washington Post, it happens at the Times, it happens in magazines, it happens with books. Oprah had the guy on years ago that had written the book that had claimed it was part of it, and then it wasn't really. And it's this guy in our show is a great writer, but would have been better writing fiction than putting things forward as truth and fabrication. He has a great line at the end of it. He says, I didn't do anything wrong. And to him, that was true.
Yeah.
He didn't hurt anybody. He found out, he got a mayor to retire. He was part of that, but it turned out the mayor actually was crooked. And much like the mayor in Washington, D.C., who went down a few years ago smoking crack and da-da-da-da-da. So these things are pulled from real life experiences. They're not just, casually made up. So it's a crazy show, and it's a musical. It's when I got the script, I just thought this is one of the best scripts that I've read for anything, but this felt like more of a play with music. And it come to find out, when Jason was talking about it a couple nights ago, Jason Robert Brown, who wrote the unbelievable score for many things, but this included, that in the original conception, the only music they were going to have in the show were the 3 specialty numbers. The 3
really
made up, and then that was how it started, and then it grew and grew and grew from there. So it's fascinating to see, and those 3 brains, Jonathan and Daisy and Jason, are they're all 3 very smart, and I just kind of sat back and said, yeah, bring it on, let's do this, and I feel I'm so fortunate to be a part of the show.
Well, Daisy Prince is the daughter of Hal Prince, legendary Hal Prince.
Yeah.
And then Daisy, the apple does not fall far from the tree there. And why, there's little things about the show that I just love, and I don't understand them. Were you ever told why, stages are raked often, which means that the back is higher than the front. Why is your stage raked, and it's raked from the front, the back, and left to right? It's a double rake. It's a double rake. Sidebar before I answer that question, we had a physical therapist who came in and to help everybody. When they have a rake on a stage, they want to talk to the dancers, and because your body gets affected by that. Yeah. And we met on the stage, and she said, basically, you guys are screwed. She said, I'm used to one rake, back to front going down. But this is, you turn one way and you're this way and you're at the top over here and you're down over there. The point of it is, the reason for it, and the reason for a lot of things in the show, Daisy wanted people to feel somewhat disoriented and uncomfortable, and everything's a little bit out of whack. Like my desk in the opening scene, I've got a square room, but it's put in a funky angle in the room, and at other scenes it's straight on. And so she wanted everything to be a lot of the movement early on in the opening number, The Whole World Changed,
it's a little stilted and a little the other actors have their backs to the audience, and it's a little like, what's going on? So she wanted that to feel a little not comfortable. People aren't totally comfortable. Oh, I get what the show is, because you don't know where the show's going, and that's been fascinating to watch audiences, because the space is so intimate. I can see people's faces, and there are times I'm talking to the audience in the beginning, especially, and you just watch people get sucked into the show, and they're leaning in their seats. Oftentimes, I see mouths just kind of open. Just what's happening now? It's really kind of a journey we all go on together, and a lot of people aren't expecting it, because they've come to see a Jason Robert Brown musical. They didn't really think it was about a magazine, whatever, and then bang, it takes them places they weren't expecting.
Well, we have to go there. We have to think about it, and I love how it reflects back on the audience. Like we were talking about at the very beginning, what's more important, perceived truth or literal truth? Mm-hmm. Because as a parent, you have to tell little white lies sometimes to not just destroy your children.
Yeah. And
so that I would classify as perceived truth, not literal truth. But when you're doing journalism, God, how do you train someone, the general public, how do you train them to be their own fact checkers? And I love how this show just throws that back at you of like, you need, like what your son is doing for you and your wife, you actually have to question, even if it is from a trusted source, just step back and question where and why this is being presented to you. Why is important too.
Yeah, well, and it pops up everywhere societally now. For instance, the same son, his first year in high school, he had a history teacher, and the first day of class, the history teacher said, "Okay, here's your history books. Okay, close your books, look at the front of the book. Does anybody know Daniel Friedkin, the writer of this book?" No, nobody knows who he is. Okay. I want you all to understand that what's in this book is his opinion about history. So don't believe any of it. Check it. Find other sources. This is the text that we're using, but it's this guy's opinion about history. And of course, I grew up in a time when nobody talked about so many things in U.S. history, and we find out more and more things that are buried. I grew up in the Midwest, and we're watching the new Scorsese film, Flower Moon. That just happened. That was in Oklahoma. I never got educated about Juneteenth. I didn't know anything about this whole Indian massacre, that whole thing that was going on down there. And I didn't know about the Japanese internment camps in Utah. I came to L.A. I worked with a Japanese-American actor. I said, "Where were you born?" He said, "Utah." I said, "Utah? That's interesting." And he said, "Well, that's where my family, we were in the camps there." And I was like, "What are you talking about?" Wow. And I felt like a complete idiot. But my school didn't teach, that wasn't part of our learning. And now we're getting this, everybody's squeezing down on what we can learn, what's true, the end of the show, and he says there never was a Holocaust. We know you walk around New York City and you see the billboards, and they're those little moving signs that change. They're new since I've been here, that give you interesting facts. And 38% of the people between the ages of 18 and 49 believe that there's no anti-Semitism in the United States of America. 28% believe that there wasn't a Holocaust, and you're like, what's happening?
The sidebar on that real quick, my 7th grade, North Carolina, first in roads, last in education. That's our unofficial slogan. Could have changed since I've been in high school. My 7th grade social studies teacher asked us to make our own decision as to whether or not the Holocaust happened. And I went home to my Jewish mother, who flipped her shit.
Yes.
Yeah. Anyway, so that's there.
That's there, and is growing kind of like a wildfire, and it's scary.
Yeah, it is. There's confirmation bias that people look for. There's, again, going back to what we were talking about at the very beginning, herd mentality means you want to connect with people, and often that means you're unconsciously looking for people who share your same beliefs and your same viewpoint. And if you are in a bubble, and there's no I'm not trying to be offensive to anybody who lives one way of life or another, if you live in a certain bubble and you're not open to people outside of that bubble, everyone is not going to grow. You're just
Right.
going to continue to repeat the same bubbly behavior.
Yeah. Yeah,
So-
well, again, another great line from the show. We look for people who believe the same things that we do.
Yeah.
Which Ethan sings at the end of the show. But yeah, it's I mean, fascinating times, but it's hard to digest a lot of the times.
Hang on, everybody. We're just going to take a quick break. All right, now we're back.
And also, we're pushed and pulled by all these sources now, because being the age that I am, I can remember when the internet was starting, and
too.
Wikipedia was starting, and people were just they were writing stuff and throwing it on there as fast as they could. Who was doing that? They were interpreting whatever they wanted to and saying,
Right.
well, we just got to make code. We got to load stuff on there. We got to fill up our site and hurry, hurry, hurry. And there's stuff that stayed on there. For instance, people threw stuff on there about me that stayed on there for years that was inaccurate. And I used to say, people would start an interview a certain way, and I knew immediately that all they'd done was gone to Wikipedia, and they'd read the misinformation that Wikipedia had printed on there about where I lived, and it said da-da-da-da-da, and they were always asking me the same question. So what's it like living up there? I said, I haven't lived there in 8 years. That's old news. And you guys, I know you didn't do any other further research than that. You went to Wikipedia to prepare for this interview. But that's the world we live in now.
It's sad. Well, Wikipedia, at least, they're like, you have to cite your sources, but then the sources you're citing, if they're not fact-checked, then it becomes this compound problem.
Yeah,
I agree. 100% agree. Okay, so I know that we are running short on time and we need to wrap. I want to close with...
We're doing fine.
Well, I want to close with 3 questions that I ask everyone. Actually, no. Before I get to the standard questions, there was something...
Yes.
You said we're doing fine on time, so I want to bring this up.
Yeah.
Back to Quantum Leap for a quick second. The final title card. Dr. Samuel Beckett never returned home. A typo. Who's gonna live? Who got? Yeah. Did you know about this?
No.
Dr. Samuel Beckett. They spelled it with 1 T. The final title card has a
that's how we
typo.
No, we always spelled it that way.
No. Hold on.
Yeah, Don never
Dr.
spelled it with 2 T's.
Samuel Beckett.
People
Beckett.
spelled it the way they wanted to because they wanted to be like the writer.
So listen, when I do Dr. Samuel Beckett in Google,
Yeah.
here we go. Here's
Yeah.
misinformation that
Okay.
has perpetuated for decades now. Sam Beckett, with 2 T's, is the official spelling here as the fictional character played by you in. Yeah. So if you look
I'd
this
have to
up,
go get an old. I got to get an old script and just look in a script.
I swear to you that final title card. It's been a cult thing for decades. Of that final title card has a typo in it.
I kind of, as you're saying this, I feel like somebody's maybe said this to me once before, but it hasn't been like a big topic of conversation. But I thought I remember thinking the same thing, and I looked it up, and Don spelled it with 1 T because he didn't want it to be. He was purposely confusing himself with Samuel Beckett, but he wanted it to be his own character. I don't know.
Wow.
I'll have to check it out. I got to
Let
look it
me
up.
know. Let
Yeah,
me know
okay.
because I want to set the record straight on this.
Okay.
I want to know. But I that was such a heartbreaking finale.
It was.
Because the show, I think the cancellation was unexpected, right? Like you guys were in the works for season 6. I think when the cancellation came in.
It was one of those things where the classic Hollywood ending where I always said that Don should have won an Emmy for writing, which he never does, never has, from all the hundreds, thousands. They just celebrated we just did a special on the 1,000th hour of NCIS, the combined series.
Jesus, that's so many hours.
Think about that. And 4 of them are still, 3 of them are still on the air. So we were finishing the season. There were rumors that we might not continue. So Don had to write a script that could serve as the last ever, would allow us to come back for a season, the next season, if they chose to renew us, and would also leave the door open if they wanted. Back then, sometimes people did little movies of the week. We did people would do a wrap up or spin it off into a film or do da-da-da-da-da-da. So he carved that last episode out that gives you all of the possibilities of the show continuing, if it's over, it's over, and it's sad. But then at least Sam's, like I always said, Sam's out there doing good work to this day. That's the hope. Even though we never got home, that he's still out there doing his thing, and that's a happy thought, as opposed to he never got home, because we showed that to our children when they were younger, and my one son just burst into tears at the end. He was just like, what? And he felt like, he'd just been injured. I could just see it on his face. He was so hurt. You never got home. He was. So
you played that character with so much love and empathy. Like we fell in love with Dr. Beckett, with Sam Beckett.
Yeah. Well, it was great. It was a great character because he was so immature in his life experiences. So he was able to kind of go wide-eyed into everything, and in a way it's like it's that Midwestern kind of naivete, and because they haven't been raised, they weren't, when we go do the LA riots episode, it's like, what the heck, what is this? I'm in the middle of a riot. We don't have those back in Iowa or whatever. And he was just like a blank page. You could just try anything on him, and he was willing, as a scientist, willing to explore, and he was open to taking it all in, and he had a big heart, and that kind of just got him through it, counterbalanced beautifully by the sarcastic, hard living Al Calavici, which just was just beautiful, a beautiful match. And again, stuff that you can't really bring it back today because it's just not appropriate. I mean, Dean's character, is hard to write somebody like that these days and have people accept them and love that character as much as people love that character. And he was definitely was inappropriate in our worldview today. But
do you think Sam, because at the end of the series, Sam Beckett learned to control his leaps. Do you think that he purposely chose to never come home?
Well, I don't take that from that last episode that he learned how to control them. I think he understood. I felt the opposite, that he realized that he could never control them.
Oh, so it's an acceptance.
We spent 4.5 seasons trying to figure it out, and Ziggy's going to do this, and we're going to get it and figure it, and the 98% chance if you do this, you're going to get home. We did all that. And at the end, he meets God, Bruce, in the bartender, and he kind of gives it up. Then it's just like, oh, wow, okay, I'm a servant. I'm serving a higher, whatever you want to call it, a power. That's my mission in life. And
wow.
And that's kind of the way I took it. And so again, it would have been, if we'd gone on, it would have been interesting to see how Don would have dealt with that. And at the same time, we had the built-in gimmick that you could always say, the last leap, I got Swiss cheesed again, and I don't remember what happened the leap before, that this happened in a coal mine. I don't remember it, and off Sam goes to the next. I mean, we had a lot of fun stuff planned, and they were thinking about more out of the box kind of stuff. But it's a show that I'm happy it still holds up. I'm happy when people find it still, because it's in reruns and people can find it. And I'm going to start showing my kid this show,
just like The Connector too. It deals with some serious things in some lighthearted ways and some funny ways, while still keeping very true to the purpose and the meaning of just doing good. It was always about just doing good. And
the old timey guys, Cronkite and those guys, there was such a high moral bar code that those guys lived under, that we felt, or we assumed. So we assumed that when they turned on the TV and they spoke to us about whatever, the moon landing or Vietnam or whatever, that it was true, and that it was we could trust them, and that they were giving us information that wasn't bought for or paid, or anything like that. Mm-hmm. And mm-hmm. Who do you turn on for that? Who do you believe? I mean, who could you point to and say?
Anymore.
Some of the old guys, yeah, but it's hard because they work for a network, and the network's mm-hmm. trying to get ratings, and it's just not about, because there are more than 3 channels. People are doing things to sensationalize and attract people to their to sell their toothpaste, and and therefore they have a different motive than just simply the facts. Just the facts.
Yeah, and it's omitting details is almost, if not worse, arguably worse sometimes than telling the whole truth. Because you could stand behind a network, a network or somebody could stand behind something like, oh, well, we didn't lie about anything. We didn't make up anything. But also on the flip side, you didn't tell the whole truth either. You left out some of the most important facts that then allow people to, maybe make a decision that would hurt your ratings later on down the line.
No, there's shaping going on.
Yeah.
And curating going on. And it's like, okay. And we've, as divided as the country is, we've divided the news up also. And that in itself is just like, no, we've got to somehow find a way back to center where we can accept certain things. The sky is blue with white clouds in it today for the most part, and everybody says, I agree with you. Well, that's true.
For the most part. Okay. Now, final closing questions. I think I need to do that in my Walter Cronkite voice. Let's see. Closing standards. First off, everyone go see The Connector, extended through March 17th. Okay, I'll cut that out. I'm not going to cut it, but I'll stop doing the voice. Okay, first question, very simply.
Well done.
Thank you very much. I'm Walter Cronkite. I also do big mustache banker guy. Yeah, you got it. Okay. First question, just very simply, is what motivates you?
My family, my kids, my wife, and people. People motivate me.
What advice would you give to your younger self and younger people listening now, starting out down a similar path?
Stick with the theater. I say that to people all the time, that if you want to learn, build your instrument and build character and an understanding of how hard it is to do what we do, discover the theater, get into the theater on any level that you can, because there's great joy and just that's the best time. The best, people say this all the time. When I was in high school and did the production of that, was the most fun I ever had doing that. When we built our own sets and we were, figuring out how to. My mom made the costume for Godspell and that's the best. That's the best time. Outside, summertime, sweating, doing La Mancha in the middle of 100-degree heat in St. Louis. They couldn't, the mustache is sliding off my face because the glue won't hold it on. That's the best time, you try and find those kinds of experiences if you can, and tuck those away, because you can build off of all of that stuff. It's pure. It's not that, the further along you get, it gets less and less pure.
Okay. That's such a beautiful answer. All right, last question then.
Yes.
If you could only see one show for the rest of your life, but you can see it as many times as you want, what would you see?
Oh my God. Well, I just saw Sweeney yesterday, so I'm kind of all Sweeney'd up right now, but that's one of my favorites. I'll leave it there.
Sweeney.
As grim and dark and messed up. There's so many elements of that show that I just...
You're not alone. A lot of people have said Sweeney.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's good. All right. Where can we find you on social media?
I'm there. I've got an Instagram.
Well, I am on Instagram, Threads, TikTok, Facebook. I don't know how to do any of them still. If you're listening and you want to help me out, please send me a DM or something. Let me know you want to help. Leave a rating and a review wherever you are listening now. Thank you to Jukebox the Ghost for the intro and the outro music. And Scott Bakula, holy cow, man. It's been such a pleasure and an honor to meet you. And you are every bit as nice and charming and fun as I hoped you would be. And
thank you, Alan.
And it was really a pleasure to talk to you.
It was a ball. Thank you so much.
Take a deep breath, make the world a little colorful.